The Paralympics also. One bronze has been won today, and our reporter, our senior colleague, Elena Shiveka, is in Tokyo, Japan, and gives us a daily brief on the Paralympics. And remember that you can also get to watch 52 minutes of the best action from the Paralympic Games Tokyo 2020 on KBC Channel 1 every day at 10 p.m. and on Sunday, the 5th of September, at 2 p.m. Join us as we give you the closing ceremony of the games that keep moving on, the Paralympic Games Tokyo 2020 on KBC Channel 1, your true sports partner. We continue with our conversation this morning and we move on to basketball. And there is a conversation about basketball that started about let me just say, around 2018. Kenya qualified for AfroCan, which is the second tier of continental championship basketball. Kenya went out to Mali and they finished second behind the Democratic Republic of Congo. Wins against Tunisia were so huge that the buzz around that team got so big. When the final was televised, the Nyayo National Stadium Gymnasium was packed to capacity. Then follow up with that, with Kenya qualifying for the AfroBasket championships that are going on in Rwanda. They won against Mali yesterday, and that means they get one more game. This is a pre-quarter-final encounter against the team that they beat to get, to advance forward. South Sudan, they play against them tomorrow in a pre-quarter-final match, which means that the teams atop the four pools have got extra days of rest. And that's a conversation that we want to have, plus also women's basketball and how to keep this momentum going, not just for the fans, but for the sport. I'm joined by a person who's played for the Kenya Lionesses, so she knows what it is like to represent and the country, don those colors and the pressure that comes with it. Cynthia Mumbo, good morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
A coach who's always, who always gets to see these players. Zedekiah Ong'ang'a, he coaches Riara and also works with Vikapu. Good morning.
Good morning.
And I'll talk about, the policy and the thinking behind some of these things from later to you, Cynthia, and more of the technical aspects. But so far, from the AfroBasket Championships, Kenya going after 28 years, from each one of you, what has been your experience as, watching from Nairobi as the team played the matches against Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, and against Mali yesterday? I'll start with Cynthia.
First, let me correct. I didn't play for the Lionesses. I was team manager for the Lionesses.
Yes. Oh, sorry.
Right. No problem at all. I think it's important to be clear. I'm very excited about what the guys have done now. You have to give credit to the team, the management team, and the consistency that the players have shown on the court. So there's one thing I've seen that I've not seen in a long time. It's heart. These guys are coming on the court, and they really are hungry to deliver, and they're hungry to get in there and win, and that's something that is extremely commendable.
And from a coaching perspective, what is the change you've seen with the national team at this championship?
I think it's growth. They've really grown over time. Remember, 2 years ago, there was that momentum. There's the fusion of new players in the team that has gone so well. And one impressive thing is when Coach Liz Mills was talking about the future, and he was mentioning players like Fidel Okoth, who plays for Strathmore. He was mentioning about Fahim, who plays for the Thunder, Derek, who plays for Ulinzi. So these are some of the new players who we'll be seeing in the coming future. And as a development coach, I'm so proud of the step she's taking.
For about 30 of the 40 minutes, Kenya played really well, but the other minutes blew off. I'll be specific about the Cote d'Ivoire game. Quarter 3, the start of it, and quarter 4, the end of it.
I think she has also brought something, and that is a high-intensity game. So I do believe down that stretch, the players were a bit fatigued, and that is why we caused the turnovers and everything. But I think she was able to address it in the Mali game, because remember, also against Mali, it was a high-intensity game, and we have also seen players being rested, and the rotation has been so well. That is one thing I commend about, because if you see the Mali game, we saw Griffin.
Yes, he had 12 points in the game.
He showed up, but these are players that didn't show up in the game against Cote d'Ivoire. So I think for Cote d'Ivoire, it was a very, very experienced team, and the way they've carried themselves out up to this particular time, they're a surprise package. Even yesterday when they went all out and beat Nigeria, they really, really shocked people.
Okay. Cynthia, your reaction to what the national team coach has done, and and you've also mentioned, Zedekiah has mentioned about the intensity in the game. How different is it from what we would see normally at the Nyayo National Stadium or Kasarani or USIU?
I think there's a very big focus on statistics. So you can tell she's really looking at what players are doing on the court and reading the stats. So one of the things that I think she realized is the average turnovers was 24. And so they worked on the turnovers. This past game they had 19 turnovers. That's a coach who's in tune with what's happening with players on the court, and I think that has been a major difference in terms of really understanding what player brings what onto the court. And how they're able to use their positive points to be able to deliver the team. The other thing I've realized is there's actually really good team chemistry and teamwork, and she's been able to work around that to make sure that the team is working commendably. Initially, we were relying heavily, and she was relying heavily, and the team was relying heavily on Tyler. And Tyler is a star. We have to give it to him, whether the team's doing well or not. He's amazing. But Odera came through, a young lad who has been doing. He stepped up when I believe it was Nigeria.
Yes, Nigeria.
When Nigeria held on Tyler, he was a surprise player. And then, in the game with Mali, the other team didn't understand Griffin. So, Griffin took over, and the coach was encouraged and say, look, they don't know. I actually remember one of the commentators saying, who is this guy? And those of us,
where has he been?
Where has he been?
He's our
Kenya One.
He's the KBF League Kobe Bryant.
Yeah, we call him Kenya One.
But I also think that came into play because, remember, the two assistant coaches have coached him at the Thunder. So
that is
Sadat Guy and Abenson. So I think they understand at what point they needed to bring Griffin, and he stepped up to the show.
Yeah.
I want to also talk about the Lionesses, and we've seen Mercy Wanyama and Victoria Reynolds push the side. Eventually it was, let me say, it was the worst start any team would want to have at the Zone 5 qualifiers in Rwanda, but eventually it looks like in a normal scenario they would not have qualified if it was just round robin. But when the semis were called, a different team came up. What's the story here that we've got?
We have to give it to the girls. I think I was one of the people who really heavily criticized the team, and I have to apologize to them because I honestly criticized the team heavy on the first game, and they came out and they said, those of you who are speaking, all this trash, we're here to show you who we are. A lot of them had not played together. I think with COVID, they had not played any, technical game together. Right, so they literally came from training, it wasn't a long period, and boom, they were in the games. So they had to learn their chemistry. Many of them came from very different places. So you can imagine putting in a team, getting onto the court, and learning each other while you're on the court. You've not had a proper opportunity to really experience each other. So I think that is where the biggest challenge was. But eventually they got their confidence really high up there, and they went all in and decided, what, each of us has something that we're bringing on this table. Victoria, I've never watched Victoria play. Her father is a former international. She comes from a very strong basketball background. She really, took it in and went out there. Okal's sister, Koranga.
Yeah,
Felmas. Absolute star. She stepped up and played the game that she's been learning to play in the US. And all the other girls, they came in and they said, look, we've lost. That game is gone. We're coming back onto the court, and we want to show what we're made of. And that absolutely they did.
And it now brings up the conversation. And you can, let me digress, move away from basketball, move to football. So, my apologies. If we go back to between 1988 and 1992, Kenya qualified for 3 consecutive Cup of Nations, Africa Cup of Nations. Kenya was a top 10 country. In 88, there were 8 teams. In 90 and 92, there were 12. And the qualification process was brutal. It was knockout.
Yeah.
But there is a story behind it. The development program that was set up through the Olympic Youth Centers in 1974. It's only 14 years later that people came to realize the fruits of it. That system collapsed. It took 12 years for Kenya to qualify for another AFCON. So with that in the background, Zedekiah, you're the development coach.
Yes.
What needs now to be done to ensure that what the momentum that's been built, 28 years, especially for the men, 28 years is a long time. It's an entire generation.
It's quite a long time. If you say that I was 2 years old, so that tells you how long the wait has been. But I think people slept on the job because people just relaxed and they were like, okay, we're here, we'll dominate, we'll do. But they don't understand that when you guys qualify for that qualifiers or that tournament, it means more work for you. There's no time to go, sit back, relax, win now, celebrate now, but tomorrow we start working. Like now, the momentum is so good. They've qualified, they're playing. We play South Sudan. We win, we go to the next level. We lose, we come back home. But what next when you come back home? So that is the big question. And if we're going to wait for the tournaments or the qualifiers to start preparing the national team, then it's going to get crazy. We're going to get knocked. We have to look at, if we look at now the rankings, world rankings, we're 111.
Yes.
Uganda are 95. South Sudan are 92. If you look at Rwanda, they are around 93 there, about. All the East African countries are ahead of us, you see, in terms of world ranking. So it means if we go back and sleep, it means we're going to even fall back in the pecking orders. So the federation needs to come up with a youth structure, which is a national structure, whereby all these academies that are working and training basketball players, they can be fed into that and they can be groomed. Remember, when you go to Senegal, they have the seed. When you go to Nigeria, they have the power forward. When you go to Angola, they have the, I'm forgetting the name. When you go to South Africa, they have the ball in motion. All these are programs, national programs in those countries that are set up to ensure that the best of the best in those countries get there. Once they get there, they get opportunities abroad. And that is when, now when they come back to play in this continental championship, they're way, way ahead of us.
Cynthia, yeah, you want to say something about that?
I agree with him until they say they go to play abroad. I know that abroad is such a big deal. Vikapu, we started Vikapu. Vikapu is local, and I'm not saying Vikapu is the only one. There are very many local ones. So I'm in absolute agreement with him. The other day, the KBF set up a league for under 14. I think that's absolutely commendable. We have a very strong high school basketball system.
Yes.
The question then lies is, what is the basketball strategy that we have? What is the basketball structure that we have? I mean, a lot of the young guys that you're seeing playing in the national team today, you have to give credit. Many of them played in the high school league. Many of them played, and then they went outside. But then locally, what is happening? What does the current local league look like? How valuable is it? Does it encourage players to want to play, to become better? So are we maintaining the best here? It's expensive to take players outside and to bring them. I think one country that has done really well by having localized systems is Angola. And there you can see they also slept because they became very big. They became so big for so long, and everybody was building around them. Everybody was looking at them and saying, we are going to beat Angola. Cape Verde learned their basketball in Angola. A lot of the players from, and you can see what they did. Mozambique learned their basketball from Angola. So a lot of guys, the Angolan basketball system got comfortable, which is what happened to Kenya. We got comfortable because we were top 10 in the world, top 10 in Africa at some point.
Actually, number 2 or 3 in Africa. I think only Senegal could beat Kenya at one point.
Yes. Commendable work being done. There's always room for improvement. So my take has always been, what are those gaps? What is the gap around development? Is it infrastructure? Is it access to that infrastructure? Is it a system? A nationalized system? What's our play, right? What's our basketball play? Is it coaching? Do we have enough capacity and capability? Do we have the right people? Are we growing the right people? Is it referees? Are we training enough referees so that our players get to learn what that means getting into a system. So, you know, when you talk about structure, you're not just talking about structure for the sake of, oh, there's a game being played and you have under 14 and under 16. What's the ecosystem around this structure that will make, you know, this development work?
Now let's talk about actually when you talk about the courts, and for you as a coach, let's think Nairobi and around, how much of access to some of these, because most of the places you'd find a basketball court would be a high school in this country. Where's the access to this to, say, members of the public outside of the normal, you know, the school period, and the right entry point for someone who wants to be, you know, a serious basketballer?
I think we must be intentional, and our intentionality starts with building infrastructure. And this is something that the sports ministry needs to be very, very keen on. For an example, we only have 2 international stadiums in Nairobi, which is absurd. We need to have like 10 or 15 national stadiums in Nairobi.
And we continue with our conversation about basketball and development. We are with Coach Zedekiah Ong'ang'a. And Coach, infrastructure in this country and secondary schools are primarily the place where anyone can get a basketball court in the country. How much of it is required, and at what point do you transition most of these people from the development point to now competitive courts, where I think in the country we'll be talking about 4 or 5. I mean Makande, I think you'll be talking about Makande, Nazarene and Kasarani, 3 of them, and Nyayo.
Yeah, as I was saying earlier, we need like about 10 to 15 international stadiums only in Nairobi, and across the country close to 100, because infrastructure plays a very big role. As we were on a break, somebody was just texting me, I should talk about infrastructure in Naivasha, in Nakuru. You see, these are towns that are doing so well in terms of basketball development, but they lack infrastructure. Yesterday I was listening to some conversation when Jimmy Wanjigi was being interviewed, that Kenya was supposed to be gifted a national stadium, but they said no. And they say that gift us a road. And that really pained me, because this could have changed so many lives. So we need to be very intentional. For an example, the expressway that is being constructed, the guy is going to make a profit of close to 106 billion. And part of that should be the guy who is getting all that profit. He needs to build infrastructure. Build us another Nyayo Stadium, which may cost you around 24 billion. You see, that
give back through that fund.
Yeah, that fund. And when I see our sports CEOs in these meetings, them having conversation and stuff, these are the deals that she's supposed to be.
All right, we'll take a look at that conversation and pass it on. Now, something else that people ask: at what point do you introduce somebody to basketball if you're going to sustain this momentum, Cynthia? Because we've got, I mean, we know in Kenya, unless you've got the advantage of an environment where there's a basketball court, for everybody else, it's secondary school.
Yeah, I started playing basketball at 13. So, and in the US, that's old.
Too old, yeah.
That's too old. So, I mean, I think we've seen what the NBA is doing in Africa. I think they have 49 or 50 junior NBA leagues running across the continent, which is fantastic. Some of them are 16. I think when we ran ours in Kenya, it was under 14 and 14 to 16. So, you know, that's where Africa is. But if you have access to a ball, give that kid a ball at 3 years. Give that kid a ball at 4 years, at 5 years. Vikapu starts from 6 years onwards. So, you know, the sooner you introduce a child to, you know, the opportunity, the better. I'll just touch on infrastructure, because I think it's very important. Our problem is we constantly think about government putting up infrastructure. Anywhere else in the world where sports works, sports is a private entity. As much as government supports, especially through policy, we need to get to a point where I can put up a basketball court because I can sustain it as a business. You know, I can sustain it as a business. I can own a franchise. I can own, so that facility does not just support me as a business person, but supports the community around. If you have a basketball court in a proper basketball court in Kisumu. I mean, look at the data. Who are the tallest people in this country? We don't even have an indoor court.
Actually, in Kenya, they say they're from Kajiado and Narok.
But even then, let's put an indoor basketball facility in Kajiado and Narok and give those guys an opportunity to jump inside that basketball court. Because if you build it, they will come. And if you build it, they will come from 3 years old because they will see, you know, I want to be like this person, or I want to go and play in that space. That's one thing that we haven't been able to get right. Government's job should not necessarily be to build stadium. They should be an enabler so that we are able to build these stadia as private entities.
Usiseme serikali saidia tena. Sema serikali facilitate.
Yes.
Yes. So here is something else. You're a coach. What is the transition as you come to from say 14 to 16 to 18 by the time somebody is 20? What are the things that they should know as they progress, such that if they're called up to the national team, you won't have to teach them how to do a free throw?
Yes, like us from Vikapu, we use a sports model called the long-term athlete development. So this is a model that programs a player's growth. So from 5 years, there are skills that they need to have learned. By the time they're 12, it means they can shoot, they can dribble, they can with both hands, they can have their crossovers. Now they're starting to learn what are called set plays, whereby they come on transition, they set the ball moves one direction, somebody comes, sets a screen. By the time they're 14, now they're being exposed to structured competitive games. By the time they're 16, now they can start playing internationally structured game, at least 70, 60 games per year. By the time they're 18, it means they're good to go. When they're called the national teams, you don't have like to come, tell them that do this, dribble with the left or what, because they've gotten the exposure, they've traveled, they've played in all sorts of environments. So at the end of the day, by the time they're now in their senior national team, they're ready to execute. Now that is now the performance stage and competition.
The whole a whole changing scenario in the country. We're seeing Cynthia as we close, and I want you to say this: the basketballers who've come through the school system, there are those who've had scholarships in the United States. We can mention basically this Morans team that we've watched play. They've come through the school system and got basketball scholarships. Others are playing pro basketball outside the country. What are the opportunities for those who've come through the school system to come and, you know, play for the national team, inspire, and also be part of the development?
Well, I think first things first is that they need to understand that their role is to inspire, right? I mean, I come from a very commercial background, so I always speak on it this way because if you empower a player, what does empowerment mean? That they can pay their rent, they can, you know, they can live their life through sport. We need to move our sport locally to that level. Everybody who wants to play and go and play outside. It's not sustainable locally. We need to create a sustainable environment where we have players playing here. And that will inspire other people, and that will inspire younger players. If I can be able to ply my trade locally, and people can see me. I mean, when I watch sports news, I think this is one of the very few sports media platforms where we consistently talk about local, you know, football, local basketball, local volleyball, local. You can imagine if we had 100 of these on all different platforms. You know, people can see that. And so inspiration comes from what is it that's going to make my life better. And we can't run away from that. But ultimately, I believe the players like Okal are doing amazing stuff beyond just supporting. I think he started an academy as well.
Yes.
Beyond, you know, running his academy, he has a magazine, he has a media platform where he's pushing, you know, this, and he's got I think I saw him got, you know, the blue tick the other day.
Yes,
the blue tick. So
yes, he got that blue tick, and he's putting out
He's
of a
putting out
business
that,
with the Doctor magazine.
Yeah. Exactly, with the Doctor magazine. He is the doctor. So let's encourage more players. I believe Tyler is working around his brand, and he's going to be putting something out soon. So there's, you know, the business is not just them being on the court. There's so much more that they can do that can be able to inspire young people. But that ultimately goes into what comes into my pocket and how comfortable am I that will be able to inspire other young people.
Well, thank you very much, Cynthia Mumbo, CEO Sports Connect Africa, former team manager of the Kenya Basketball Alliances, and she's also worked with the Kenya Basketball Federation within the executive in marketing and strategy. Plus, also, she ran for the presidency earlier this year. Well, and she has a lot of stories to tell about how she campaigned in a week. That's a story for another day. Zedekiah Ong'ang'a, coach of Riara University and also a development coach with Vikapu. Thank you very much. And we take a quick short break and we'll come back. I want you to think of 9 billion shillings that revolves around a sporting industry in this country. 9 billion shillings, and this is not just a sport where you'd ideally think of it. So I'll give you 3 hints. You can do it anywhere you are, anytime you want. Think of which industry that is that's circulating 9 billion shillings in the Kenyan economy.